Everyone for joining. My name is Stephen Ward, and I will be presenting on the topic of procurement approvals in the cloud. So let's get started. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me. So just to set an agenda for this seminar, I'm going to give a brief introduction behind who I am. I'm going to go over some navigation. Since this is for beginners up to intermediate levels, I'm going to go through the general navigation from the home screen, how we're going to navigate through our procurement approval setups. I'm going to go through some general terms, and then I'm going to show some key setups for the approval process that we're going to be looking at today in details. And then I will provide a demonstration on everything from creating a purchasing document all the way through its approval. I will then also show another type of approval, which is the job level approval setups, and then I can answer any questions anyone may have. All right, so here is just a bio slide of me. So I am from McLean, Virginia, right outside DC. I started at Creole a little over 3.5 years ago, essentially right out of college. I have three plus years of experience in supply chain management, and then also financials as well. And then I started out actually as a technical writer. I've been through four full cycle EBS implementations. And along with that, I've done 4 Oracle Cloud implementations. And the modules I work in mainly are order management, procurement, and inventory, but also have experience within financials as well. I do have my procurement implementation certification for procurement. I also have obtained my Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt. And then just down at the bottom, you can see some of the clients that I've worked with, from the Department of Homeland Security, Toshiba, Adaptive Health, which is out of Maryland, and then also the US Department of Energy. All right, so to start off this seminar, I'm going to go into the navigation details. I'm basically going to show the basic flow of how you get to the configuration section. So I'm going to show you the employee supervisor approval structure. So from our home screen, I'm going to be logged in as Calvin Roth. So this is a Oracle demo environment. So I'm using their user, Calvin Roth, who is a procurement manager. So I'm logged in as Calvin, and then as you can see from across the top below the good afternoon, there are different modules that I can choose from. You can see my team, procurement, contract management, payables, projects, tools. This is just the most recent release for Oracle Cloud. This is the home screen. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So from the home screen, to navigate to where we're going to set up our purchasing approvals, I'm going to select the hamburger, which is in the top left, which is circled in red. We'll navigate there. I'll go to the next slide. This will bring up this panel to the left, and I'm going to select under My Enterprise, I'm going to go ahead and select Setup and Maintenance. So for those that you may not know, this is where most of the configurations and system maintenance occurs for implementers. So a lot of the setups and all the different types of modules that Oracle offers, this is where most of those configurations take place. So then when I drill down into, so let me go back. When I drill down into setup and maintenance, this is the screen that will appear. So in the top left corner where it says setup, there's going to be a list of values that appears, and it can be anywhere from procurement, which is shown now, to supply chain execution, order management, enterprise contracts. So for this, since we're doing purchasing document approvals, we're going to want to select procurement. So then underneath the functional areas, we're going to see approval management. So we're going to want to select that. And then when you do so, on the right-hand side, under approval management, we'll see required tasks. You can also drop that down to show all tasks, but for approvals, there's 2 required ones. manage requisition approvals as well as manage purchasing document approvals. So for this, we're going to select manage purchasing document approvals. So it'll bring us to this approvals like overview kind of screen. I'll go into more details about what we're seeing here at the but as you can see, there's a variety of different stages that we can select from, and we can edit and then also enable the rules from here. So I will come back to this screen a little bit further down. All right, so a little introduction just about approvals. Approvals are rules defined based on the business processes and decisions of the customer or client. So the best time to kind of gain the requirements and understanding of how approvals should be set up is during the enterprise data design. This is where you can have a discussion and really come up with how the approval should be configured in the system. So the system is flexible, so it is important to meet the requirements. And there's a lot of different ways we can tweak approvals to meet any of the requirements a client may have. So here's just a picture of a simple approval structure on a purchasing document. All right, so I'm going to go into some general terms for purchasing approvals. All right, so there really are three standard approval setups in cloud. The first one would be a job level approval structure, which you can see on the right. Sorry, that would come in the next slide. But there are three typical ones. There's the job level approval structure, the position-based approval structure, and then thirdly, the employee supervisor employee structure. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on during this demonstration. All right, so here is just a nice little diagram I created just to show kind of how the flows go for each of the three different approvals. So the diagram here depicts the employee supervisor approval structure, and you can see that it starts with a manager, or this could be a buyer in any case, and then it travels up the stream via the employee supervisor. So each user has its own manager, so there will be a relationship built where the system will know who the manager for that employee is, and then it will travel up that flow. The position-based approval structure is relatively simple. It goes from the buyer or manager in this case to the senior manager to the director, and just flows up like that. And then there's also the job level approval structure, and that flows up through the job level. So you can see here a main difference is that there is a job level for each different user, and that's another setup that takes place within the system. So here's back to that approval screen that I said I would come back to. So as you can see, there's the stage section, the participant section, the routing section, and then the voting regime. And then at the end, it just shows whether it's enabled or not. So the stage is the outermost box. And we can see that there's the pre-approval stage, the term stage, as well as the post-approval. So then there's also, so that's obviously pre-approved. The terms is really when you're creating a document, and then the post-approval. And then there's also post-approval FYI. And the FYI essentially is just for your information. There's no action required on that. It's just you're going to get a notification in the system, or through an email notification, or both even. So here's a diagram kind of laid out in a different format. It really breaks down how the approval process flows. The image depicts the key elements that are involved in understanding and setting up the approval rules. And the approval rules are really centered around the stage, participant, and rule elements. The system looks at how the approvals are configured, looks at the stage, whether it's pre-approved, term stage, or post-approvals, and then analyzes it. Analyzes the participants and whether it is single, parallel, or serial, or even consensus. Those are the types of different ways the approvals can flow throughout the system. So on an upcoming slide, I'll kind of go into more detail what that means. And then finally, the approval looks at the rules and conditions and fires off accordingly. So this is kind of the framework and allows the users to set the rules, and it can also allow the users to set rule priority to high, medium, or low. So this is kind of just going back on what the stage is. It's the logical grouping of approval routing rules. Each stage is associated with a dimension level, so that's header, line, level, etc. And then each stage contains at least one participant, and then they're routed via serial, consensus, or even first responder wins. For a rule to fire off, one of the conditions must be true. If not, the whole entire rule will fail. All right, so to go over just the voting regimes, I mentioned serial voting, consensus voting, and then also first responder wins. So for serial, approvers are notified sequentially and must approve one after another for the group to approve. So it starts with approver A, once approver A approves it, it moves to approver B, and once approver B approves it, it moves to approver C, and then finally that document will be approved, and it won't be approved until it moves through that entire chain. There's also consensus voting. With consensus voting, approvers are notified at once in parallel. So the notification is sent out to all the users at the same time, and once all of them kind of either approve or reject it, it will either be approved or rejected. So if two approvers approve it, but one approver rejects it, it will be rejected. If all three approve it, it will be approved. So it's really just consensus. And then there's also first responder wins. Approvers are notified at once in parallel, and the first one to take an action on that either approves it or rejects it. So an example of serial would just be if the buyer creates a procurement document, submits it, it will go through the approval process. If the process of the approving purchase order creates a notification, it will be then it approves it, it will be approved, and then it will continue down the line again. All right. All right, so here's just a nice depiction of the serial voting. Just again, approver A moves to approver B to C, and then the document is approved. And then here's just a visual depiction of the consensus voting. So as you can see, all three are notified. All three in the first picture approve it, the document's approved. And in the second picture, two approved it, one rejected. So the end result is the document is rejected. And then here's just a depiction of first responder wins. On the left, the first person approved it. On the right, one person rejected it, and it was rejected. All right, so when you're creating approval rules, there are seeded attributes that you can base them off of, and these aren't all of the attributes, but here are some examples of the header attributes. So you can have a rule fire off based off of the procurement BU, the requisition amount, who the preparer is, what ledger you're using. For line level attributes, some include the supplier, the item, the price, the amount of the line amount. And then also you can go down to even the distribution level, and you can route approvals based off the project, the natural account, the distribution account, or even cost center. So here is a picture of an actual rule in the system. So approval rules have three components. They have the condition, and the condition consists of the attribute in the approval rules. So for example, you can have a condition to include the document ordered amount, and if that amount is greater than $10,000, the approval will fire off accordingly. And there's also the action section, which is below the second half of this picture. The action consists of an action type. In this case, the action type is approval required. So you could have the action be no approval required. Then is the route using. So for this example, we're using the supervisor hierarchy. So we can route using the supervisor hierarchy, or we could have this be job level, and it would route accordingly. And then we're going to start with the approval chain of buyer, and we're going to start with the buyer. You could have this be the requester. So it could start, if you're starting with a requisition, it could start with the requisitioner and then move up accordingly. And then you can enter the number of approval levels. So for this, we just have one entered, and then also the top worker in the hierarchy. So the top worker in the hierarchy, that's where the approval flow ends. So the final approver will always be this top worker in the hierarchy. All right, so here's just an example of a condition and then the action. So for this example, we have if the purchase order approval amount attribute is less than or equal to 10,000, there's no approval required. So another attribute you can base approvals off of are categories. So you can have category driven approvals. So for example, if we have if one of the lines is for the category of software, then we can require an approval. And then also if the category is office supplies, we may not want to have approvals in place. So there's no approval required. And then down here, you can kind of have a matrix. Less than 1,000, there's none. Greater than or equal to 2,500, it's the manager, and then an unlimited amount we can have go to a senior manager. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move on to key setups. So we're going to discuss some of the key setups that are needed for the employee supervisor approval structure. So there's some overlap with approvals that overlap with like HCM. If you don't have HCM, whoever is setting up their approvals will take the responsibility of creating the job. So the first thing is creating a job. So then you're going to want to enter a job level as well. So you can just say you have 5 different jobs. The top level will be 5, the bottom level will be 1. You're going to have to create employees, obviously, and you're going to assign that employee a job. So if you have a buyer or just another level of an employee, you'll assign that employee that specific job. And then you're also going to create a manager, or you're going to assign a manager to that employee. And then you're going to configure the approval rules based off of an approval matrix. So when you're gaining the requirements of a client, you're going to want to put together an approval matrix and just kind of map out what job level, what employee has the certain amount that they're able to approve. So you're going to configure the rules based off of that, and then you're going to just create the transactions and documents, and then finally we can approve it. So here is a screenshot of where you would go to create a job. So the navigation is set up in maintenance, procurement, workforce structure, and then manage jobs. And then here we can see I typed in procurement, and then a list of procurement jobs came up, and one of them is procurement manager. They're actually all 3 procurement managers, but here you can either go into existing jobs or you can create jobs new, which you would do that by coming here to this plus sign, create, add that, or you would highlight the user and then you would select edit and go in and you can make the necessary changes to that job. So one of the other key setups was to have users obviously created. So here is a user screen. So I search for Calvin Roth, and this is some of the details we'll get when we open up this specific user. We can see that the user is active, the person type we set as employee, we have the legal employer in the business unit that we're working in, and then we also have the job. And then here we have the procurement manager. Another key setup I mentioned was that you have to have a manager relationship. So here we have Calvin Ross manager as James Seller. So that's a key piece that you have to make sure that throughout the approval flow, each user has a manager associated with them. Okay, so now back to the approval screen. So I'm gonna now actually go into the setup. So to create this approval rule, we're gonna wanna select the terms approval serial 2. So that's 2 approvers, and we're doing the serial flow. So it's gonna go from one approver to the next before it's either approved or rejected. Okay, so the next screen that we'll move into, once we actually, let me go back real quick, we'll select this line, and then we'll select edit rules above, and this will bring us to this screen. And when we get there, there's no rules set up at the moment. So to do so, we're going to select the plus sign to add our first rule. So for example, for this, we're going to add a rule, and we're going to make it PO less than or equal to 5,000. And then we can set the priority level to low, medium, high. And we're going to add the description. I'm just adding in the rule PO less than or equal to 500. So now that we have the rule set, we can add the conditions. So to do so, we're going to just select add condition. And then we're going to select the type approval task attribute. We're going to search for the attribute procurement BU. And then we're going to have it equal the value that we enter. And the value we enter is US1 business unit. So that's the business unit we're using for this demonstration. So we're going to select that, and then we can select OK, or we can add another, and that's what we'll do. So I went ahead and added more conditions for this one rule, PO less than or equal to 5,000. So I went in there, I entered the next rule with the condition, backing requisition exists equals no. So for this, we're not going to have a backing rec. It's just going to be a standalone purchase order. So we add that rule in. And then we add in the condition document total amount less than or equal to 5,000. And then also change order creation method does not exist, does not equal create change order. So there's no change order associated with this as well. And then we enter in the document style equals purchase order. All right, so now that we have our rule PO less than or equal to 5,000, our priority level medium, and then we have the 5 conditions we associated with this rule. So after that, we're going to go ahead and add the action. So down here at the bottom, we're going to select add action. So here we're going to add the action. So the action type is approval required. There's a drop down list. You could say no approval required. You can route using the supervisor hierarchy. So for this, we're doing the employee supervisor hierarchy. So that's what we're going to select. You could do job level or position even. We're going to start with the buyer, and then the number of approval levels is 2. And the top worker in this hierarchy is James Seller, and that was the manager that we associated with our user Calvin Roth. So then we also want to make sure that we're only dealing with documents and purchase orders that are in US dollars. So we're actually going to create a user defined attribute that we're going to actually go ahead and add into this rule. So in the top right corner, we can create user defined attributes. We used attributes that were already set up in the system by the system. So now we're going to create a user defined one here. So we're going to drill into manage user defined attributes. And we're going to enter our user defined attribute, and we're going to say that's dollar. And then our type, it's going to be currency based, and then attribute to convert type, it's going to be an approval task attribute. And the attribute to convert is going to be document total amount. So any documents, it will convert whatever the total amount is into US dollars. So convert to USD, and then we're just going to select the conversion rate type as corporate. Then we're going to select OK. So now we created our user-defined attribute, and we have to add it as one of our conditions. So we're back at the back into our approval rule, and we're going to add another condition. And then before we had the type, it was system-defined attribute or something along those lines. And now we're going to select user-defined attribute. And then the attribute we put in says $, and then we're going to also enter less than or equal to our approval rule of 5,000. So now we have our rules set up. I also added another rule as well that I did not show in here, but we have 2 rules actually set up. But I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. So to have this actually enabled in the system and have documents actually follow this rule, we're going to select deploy in the top right corner. So this is going to bring up a warning sign, a warning pop-up. The updated rules across all participants will become effective. Do you want to continue? And we're going to select yes. All right, and then we're going to get back out to this managed purchasing document approval screen. And then after that, we have to make sure we enable this. And once we enable this, this approval rule will be in effect. All right, so now we have this approval rule set up. I'm going to go into a quick demonstration on kind of how it flows through the system. So I'm logged in still as Calvin Roth, and we're going to create a purchase order. So under procurement, I'm going to select the purchase orders tile. This is going to be the purchasing overview screen. And then there's a taskbar on the right-hand side. If I select that, it's gonna pop out, and we're gonna see all these details about requisitions, orders, agreements, deliverables, and so on. So under orders, I'm gonna select create order. So we're gonna get this pop-up, this create order pop-up, and we're gonna select style purchase order, procurement business unit. This is what we're working in, US Business 1. That's what our approval rules set up in. Our requisitioning BU is the same, US 1 business unit. We're going to enter our supplier, and in this case, our supplier is Lee Supplies. Our supplier site, that will auto fill in if we have them set up. And then our default ship to location in this case is Seattle. Our currency is USD, and our buyer is myself, Calvin. All right, so this is what a purchase order essentially looks like. I scroll down, I'm adding a line. And it's a good for a laptop, and we're buying one, and the price is $1,200. So here's just the header information of that order, and I'm just going to show that we can go ahead, and from this screen we can manage approvals. So if I was a buyer, I could select manage approvals, and I could see the flow of where my document would go. So I can easily know who's in control of it at that time. In this case, we're just going to submit this document. So that document is submitted for approval. So now I'm going to log in as James Seller, who we added in as the top worker in the hierarchy. So this document should go to James Seller, who is Calvin Roth's manager. So I'm going to sign in as James Seller. And then we can see here when I'm logged in as James, the VP of Finance, there's a bell icon in the top right, and we have a notification. And we can see that this notification requires action, or action is required, and it's for the purchase order I just created, 164120, and it shows that I am the procurement manager. So I could dive into this link, approve purchase order, and I could see the full, and it would take me to the actual purchase order itself, and I could review the document, or I can just go ahead and simply approve this. So now I'm back in as Calvin, and I can see that my order 164120 with supplier lease supplies for $1,200 is in the open status. All right, so that takes care of the demonstration for showing the employee supervisor hierarchy and the key setups and key terms that relate to it. I'm just going to quickly go into key setups that are used for a position-based approval setup. So for the purpose of this presentation, I have 4 listed: create departments, create job, create positions, and then create a position tree. So job level determines, so the job level is the main piece here for this approval. The job level determines how far up the approval chain the document will go in this position-based one. All right, so here is a screen of the job procurement manager. And an important piece to notice here is the level. So for this job is level 1, but we can have another job, a supervisor or whatnot, and we can enter in level 2, level 3, level 4, and it will flow up the approval process through that level. So that's the key point in the position-based, the job level approval process. So we're going to create, in this case, we're going to create a position tree. And for example, you can have at the top a chief executive officer, below that the CFO, chief financial officer, and then down to the HR officer, and then to the CIO, and then even to an executive assistant. So this is another setup that will take place for this position hierarchy. So this is where it kind of differs from the employee supervisor. You're not needed to create this position tree. All right, so with that takes me through the employee supervisor key setups, as well as through the demonstration of the approval process. So with that, I would like to take any questions anyone may have. Kelly, are you there?
I am here. I'm sorry. I was trying to get an answer for you. We did have a question that was not quite related to this topic about ERP cloud instance access for training purposes. Do you know anything about that, Stephen?
Yeah, so Oracle provides demo instances for anyone that has an Oracle account. So if you have an Oracle account, they provide a variety of different demos. So if you don't have an account, you would have to get one. But if you do, I can navigate there and show you.
Yeah, so it would just be through OPN, right?
Yes.
I tried to confirm with Venkana. Venkana, are you still on? Does that answer? Oh, let me see. He has an Oracle support account already.
He does.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So then, I mean, I can hop out real quickly and show where that is.
If you're able to, that would be great.
So demo.oracle.com is where I go. Is everyone seeing my screen or no?
I'm still seeing the presentation question screen.
How about now?
No.
Okay, let me stop share then and reshare. I thought I was sharing my.
Oh, your desktop versus the screen. That's always an issue. Now I see.
Okay. All right. So
don't share your password publicly.
Yeah, it should not be, it should not be there. All right, so I'm gonna go to, so to access this, you go to demo.oracle.com. And then we can log in.
He appreciates that you're navigating the steps.
Yep, and then I accept. This always comes up. So to go to a demo environment, you would want to go to Instant. And then it shows a variety of demos. And so here's Fusion Apps, ERP, and then you just go in here and you'd log in. And you launch the demo, but I won't go in there because it would share the password. So that is how you go about. That would be how you go about accessing the demo instant.
I hope that helps, Benkana. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out and email myself or Stephen. And if there are any other questions from the attendees, please feel free to type them in the chat. This webinar will be recorded and sent out to all participants in attendance. So we really do thank you for joining us. I'll give you a minute if there are any additional questions. And I apologize for earlier, I was on mute.
No worries.
That happens. I don't see any additional questions right now, so I think I'll close down the chat, and we really do thank you all for joining us. And we're always available via email, and the link will be sent out shortly. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Stephen, for presenting.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Have a great day.